Gratitude is one of the most powerful ways to take any negative experience, any trauma, and turn it into growth, or what psychologists would call post-traumatic growth. So basically what you do is you look at an event, you look at any hard experience, and rather than just avoiding it, you don't want to avoid it. Psychologists say you either have approach motivation or an avoid motivation. If you have an avoid motivation, then what you're doing is you're avoiding thinking about it, avoiding worrying about it. And then that's going to hit you. You're going to get triggered and it's going to knock you off your socks. Actually, they call that invasive rumination, where you're just going about your day and then all of a sudden, boom, you get hit by thoughts or feelings about some negative experience from your past and you can't get rid of it. And if you don't turn that invasive rumination, which means it's something that hit you, if you don't turn that into what they call deliberate rumination, where you actually sit and focus on the trauma, focus on what it means, and then ultimately what you want to do is you want to twist it. You want to turn it's trauma because you have dysfunctional beliefs about it. You've got negative beliefs about it. You've got beliefs that are ultimately not helpful. That's why it's trauma. It's because how you framed it. You framed it in a meaningful way that means it's stopping you. Trauma means you have a dysfunctional belief about something in your past. I know that may sound rough because we do go through hard things and we go through things that may be fair or unfair. Trauma isn't about fairness or unfairness. It's about framing. It's about the meaning you gave to your experience. And so basically, put simply, this is what the research shows. If you want to turn a negative experience into post-traumatic growth, and post-traumatic growth means you have a clear sense of meaning, purpose, strength. Basically, you view the past in a purposeful manner. And if you add gratitude to that, you're actually grateful it happened because it's given you a greater sense of meaning and purpose. So you look at the past from a purposeful perspective. You can look at a negative event and you can say, that event had purpose in my life. I can use that experience to either help other people or to do things I couldn't have done before. I love the quote from Rahm Emanuel. He said, "Never let a serious crisis go to waste. It's an opportunity to do things you could never have done before." So crises, challenges will happen all the time. But if you look at it with purpose, if you're grateful for it, then you can use it to be better in the future. One of my good friends, Richie Norton, he's been through an insane amount of tragedy in his life. They've had one of their children die. His wife had a stroke. One of his kids got hit by a car. They lost their 3 foster kids. Every time Richie goes through something painful, he asks himself 2 questions. How can I use this to be better, not bitter? So how can I use this to be better, not bitter? If you're still bitter, then you're not dealing with it. You've still got dysfunctional beliefs about it. You're still framing it in a negative. You're still the victim. And so how can I use this to be better? And then how can I use this to help other people? Those are the 2 questions that Richie asks himself. So here's what you want to do. And there's a lot of research. I've got links down below to articles, but you're going to have invasive rumination, which means you're going to think about the trauma. It's going to hit you. But what you want to turn that into is you want to turn that into deliberate rumination. You want to sit, focus on, and think about the event. You want to think about it with your journal. You want to write about it. There's a lot of research that shows that writing about traumatic events just for a period of time actually enhances your health. Writing about your goals does the same thing, by the way. Writing about your traumas and writing about your health over time improves your physical health dramatically over time. So you want to sit and write about the event and write about what it means to you. Write about what you can do because of it now. Write about how your life can be better. I love the quote, "Life happens for you, not to you." If you ask yourself the question and you want to be proactive, how can I use this to be better rather than bitter? How can I use this to do things differently than I could not do before? What is the value or meaning or purpose of this? Sitting there and thinking about it and ultimately creating a positive meaning. Gratitude really helps. Down below, there's a research article that shows deliberate rumination means you're deliberately focusing on the event, what it means, how it shapes your life, how you're going to be different as a result, how you can be better as a result. And then gratitude means that you're actually injecting gratitude into it. You're thankful for it. You're looking for resources you can use. You're looking for how that event has strengthened you, or how it could make you better, or how you can do things differently than you could before, or how you now know things that your former self didn't know. When you go through hard experiences, it certainly hurts. But if you use it to create post-traumatic growth, meaning you actually get value out of the experience and you can be better because of it, you've got more of a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. You've clarified your values. A lot of times you going through those experiences can be one of the best things that could happen to you. Even something as small as losing your job. I know that might not seem like a trauma, but it could be a trauma in the short term if it negatively impacts you. But if you frame it in a positive way, you can use that to ultimately be a catalyst to do things you never thought you'd do before. Or sometimes really negative experiences happen that really change how you see the world. Richie Norton being one. When his child died, he became very urgent about life. He realized he was wasting his time on a lot of things. And so he started living his life at a lot higher level because he felt so much pain. Often you go through a lot of pain, and that can translate into purpose. It can translate into meaning. It can translate into calling. Only though if you use it to be better, not bitter, only if you use it and look at the value of your experiences, and only if you choose to be grateful for what you had rather than bitter. Gratitude is one of the most powerful things you can do. If you write about the hardest things in your life, and if you choose to be grateful for those experiences, you say, this happened for me, not to me. I'm going to be better, not bitter. And I can use this now to give myself greater resources to pursue a better, more meaningful life than my former self had. The person you were before you had that traumatic experience didn't have the knowledge or the capability or the meaning in their life that you now have. So you are much further along than your former self was if you choose to focus on it, learn about it, proactively choose the meaning of it. One of the things that Richie told me is you shouldn't just look for the meaning. If you're looking for the meaning, that's going to lead you down a really negative spiral. Just as an example, if you have something traumatic that happens, you have a child that passes away. And by the way, trigger alerts big time. I know that a lot of people have been through a lot of hard experiences. I've been through a lot of experiences. But Richie said, I had to stop looking for the meaning, because if he was looking for a meaning, that ultimately led him to comparison, social comparison, where he was comparing his situation to others, and maybe other people, their child didn't die or something like that. So Richie, instead of looking for a meaning, he chose his own meaning. He focused on the experience. He chose the meaning of it. He chose who he would be as a result of that, and he chose to be grateful. He chose to be a better person as a result. He chose to have a better marriage as a result. He chose to have greater meaning in his life. He chose to become a better person as a result. He has an amazing life. Him and his wife live an absolutely amazing life. They live life on their own terms. They would fit what psychologists call self-determination theory. They choose where they live, where they work, how they spend their time, but they really clarified those values and their commitment to those values because of some of the tragedies they've been through. So they are a lot better, not bitter. They're also grateful, they're humble, and they just live better lives, and they're insanely grateful. So gratitude is one of the most powerful ways to transform your trauma. You can actually know that you've overcome or healed a trauma because you're grateful for what happened, and you've turned it into growth. You've turned it into more resources that you can use to help yourself and other people. You've turned it into enhanced meaning in life, purpose, resilience, strength. And you do that by, once you get hit by invasive rumination, means once you get hit by a thought or a feeling about it, rather than avoiding it and not dealing with it, you go into approach mode, approach orientation. You proactively, deliberately ruminate on it. You actually write about it in your journal. You think about it, you talk about it with other people. There's a great quote from Peter Levine. He said, trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what you hold on the inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. Sometimes you need to be your own empathetic witness. Sometimes your journal can be your empathetic witness. It can be where you write about what you feel. You can write about how it felt, but also then you can proactively choose the meaning, as Richie does. You can choose to make it mean whatever you want it to mean. You can choose to frame it as a positive. You can choose to be grateful for everything involved. You can choose to turn it into what Dan would call a gain rather than being in the gap. If you choose to be grateful for it and choose to frame the meaning, then you own your past. If you don't, then your past owns you. And you get to choose the meaning of your past. You get to choose the framing of your past. Your past is a story, but whatever story you tell, that's what shapes your identity. And that's ultimately what happens with trauma, is if it's unresolved, then you've now got a crippled identity because of it. You're crippled because of something that happened in your past. Whereas if you own your past, if you own the story, if you frame the meaning yourself, then you can be empowered because of it. It's all a meaning, it's all a story. Your past is a fiction. It's what you decide to give meaning to. There's a great quote on this by George Orwell, which he wrote about in 1984. He says, whoever owns the past owns the future, but whoever owns the present owns the past. And this is one of the coolest findings in psychology, is that whatever view you have in the present, that's what shapes how you view your past. So if you're grateful in the present, if you're proactive in the present, if you take ownership over your meanings, then you can choose how you frame the past. And if you choose to frame your past with gratitude, with meaning, and with proactivity, then you can have post-traumatic growth, which means you can take ownership of your own future. If you don't, then you're going to get hit by that invasive rumination. Means if you don't deal with it, then it's going to create post-traumatic stress, where you're not dealing with it and you just are trying to get through life, trying to avoid it, and every once in a while it just triggers you and it destroys you because you're not dealing with it. Write about it, create the meaning for yourself, figure out how you can use this as resources to become better, use it as purpose, and meaning in your life and choose to be grateful for it. Frame it as gratitude. You can frame anything as a gratitude. Gratitude is the mother of all virtues. Gratitude will change your life. Gratitude can transform your traumas. Gratitude can make a bad day into a good day. Gratitude can make a tragedy into a triumph. Gratitude is the most powerful force. They say that gratitude is the mother of all virtues because gratitude is the gateway to all virtues. If you want to be more courageous, you start by being more grateful. If you want to be more confident, start by being more grateful. If you want to be more humble, start by being more grateful. Gratitude is the path to transforming everything. And so in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to apply the 80-20 principle to your life so that you can actually focus on results, you can focus on effectiveness, and you can remove all of the weeds from your life that will constantly infiltrate you. You can actually create barriers. You've got to create and control your environment, or else it's going to create and control you. You've got to create and control your priorities, or else it'll be overrun by other people's priorities. And so the first aspect of applying the 80-20 principle is, first off, just knowing what it means. The 80-20 principle is the idea that 80% of your results comes from 20% of what you do. There's a few things that you do that produce most of the happiness, most of the results, most of the benefits. And then there's another 80% of activities or people or situations that are in your life that are mostly just weeds in your garden. They're things pulling you off course as an airplane. And it can be really hard to focus on those things which matter most. There's a great quote that says, it's a great question really, which is, are you caught in the thick of thin things? There's a lot of thin things out there, or lesser goals. There's a great quote from Robert Brault. He said, we're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal. Those lesser goals are the weeds in your garden, or they're the turbulence pushing you off course. And so the first thing you need to do to actually apply the 80-20 principle in your life is, first off, define your desired future self. You have to define your future self, the person you want to be. And within that future self is what you value. What you value is what actually generates your future self. What do you value, and who's the person you want to be, and why do you care about that stuff? So actually defining what matters most to you. Where do you want to focus your attention? Who do you want to be? What do you want to double down on? There's a great way to look at everything in life, and that's that everything is either an investment towards your future self, which makes your future self bigger, or things are a cost towards your future self, which means you're actually making your future self less valuable. Wasting your time and just distracting yourself are costs to your future self. Eating unhealthy foods or engaging in unhealthy addictions ultimately creates a diminished value of your future self. Whereas if you're investing in your future self towards what you value, your future self becomes more valuable. And so clarifying what do you value and how can you start making more investments in those things so that your future self can increase in value. What's really interesting is that when you increase the value of your future self, your present immediately becomes better. There's a quote from Dan Sullivan. He said, the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger, because whatever view you hold of your future shapes who you are in the present. It shapes what you do. It shapes how you feel. That's why it's really important to not only to cultivate hope, but also to cultivate commitment and to clarify what you value and to look at your life and say, what are all of the things in my life that are contributing heavily towards what I value, and what are all the things that are ultimately distractions, weeds, and turbulence to my future self? What are the things that are diminishing the value of my future self? Going back to Robert Brault's quote, we're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to lesser goals. If you have too many lesser goals, too many competing goals, then your future self is hazy. It's not clear. You want to zero in on what do you value more than anything? What do you care about? What matters more than anything? And then you remove those lesser goals. You remove the weeds. You remove the friction so that your future becomes clear, so that your present can also become clear and prioritized. Once you've actually clarified what you value and what matters to you, what results you want, what you care about, you need to look at your life and say, what are the key things contributing to that future self? What are the things in my life that represent the 20%, which creates almost all of the value in my future self? Because there's so many things you're doing that are a waste of time. So for me, as an example, my faith is part of my 20% that really matters. As I invest more and more in that, every area of my life gets better. And it's important to actually bring up a concept in psychology as we're talking about this. So in psychology, passion has been broken up into two categories. You have obsessive passion and you have harmonious passion. Obsessive passion is unhealthy. Obsessive passion is where you're controlled by your passion. It's emotionally driven, it's reactive. You really get single-sided, and you put a lot of energy into something, but you're not really intrinsically motivated towards it. You're actually just operating out of impulse. And you know that you're operating on this kind of passion because you obsess on it and you can't be present. It pulls you from being present towards the things that matter, and ultimately it ends up costing the other areas of your life. So if you start obsessing on something unhealthily and you're kind of being driven by it in an unhealthy way, a reactive way, an emotionally driven way, then it's going to cost you the other areas of your life. So you know something's obsessive if it's actually making the other areas of your life worse off, and if it's dragging and distracting you from being in flow towards the things that matter. Whereas a harmonious passion is things that you control the passion, it doesn't control you, you're intrinsically motivated toward it, and it actually benefits all the other areas of your life. You can easily go into flow, it's value-based, it's clear goal-based, it's not reactive, it's something you can control, but specifically it improves the other areas of your life. And so you want to look at your life in priorities in the manner of, is this harmonious or is this obsessive? When I think about my faith, it's certainly harmonious, because when I invest more and more into my faith, it actually improves the other areas of my life. It improves my family, it improves my decision-making, it improves how I go about all of my actions. And so part of my 80-20 is my faith, other one is my family. And then it gets a lot more personalized, and you have to decide what for you creates most of your results. For me, one of them is writing. Writing is how I became a professional author. Writing is ultimately how I became an entrepreneur. Writing pays the bills for me, and writing is where I get most of my learning done. Writing is part of my 20% that creates way outweighted results. Every time I invest, $1 into writing, I get $100 back, kind of thing. And what's interesting is when it comes to the 80-20, most people, they spend way less of their time on the things which matter most, and they invest almost all of their time in things which matter least. They're caught in the thick of thin things. And so for me, I've been taking time to look at where are the 80-20 in my life, how can I invest more into those things? And from a psychology standpoint, motivation is often broken into two categories. You've got approach motivation and you've got avoid motivation. Now, avoid motivation means you're avoiding things you don't want. That could be weeding the garden, and that's certainly important. You want to weed out the garden, you want to remove those lesser goals, you want to remove the distractions, you want to create and control your environment. I also love the quote from Zig Ziglar. He said, your input shapes your outlook. So part of weeding out the garden and removing the 80% of trash that's distracting you from your future self and ultimately costing and devaluing your future self is, what are the inputs that are pulling you away from the 20% that matter most? We live in obviously a media-driven world, and so it can be easy to get sucked in and realize that you've actually gone way more off course than you think. Maybe you've gotten sucked way into the turbulence and now you need to course correct. And so a big aspect of applying the 80-20 principle to your life is every week it's really good to take 10 to 30 minutes to review your week, review how you did, review the results you got, and then to make better plans for the next week. It's also good on a daily basis to define out 3 key wins that you want and then to approach those wins. Approach means when you wake up, start approaching aggressively the results you want to make that day. The faster you can wake up and start aggressively investing in your future self, meaning you're actually taking action towards things that are generating your future self. That, for me, that could be writing the book, or making this video, or spending time with my kids. Whatever the 80-20 is, you want to invest in that early and often. Just like you'd want to invest, like literally in the stock market early and often. The sooner you invest, the longer the compound, and the more often you invest, the more committed you become. Because your behavior is what, generates your identity in a large part. You are what you repeatedly do. Also, when it comes to removing friction, I would invite you every 90 days. Every 90 days, take stock, because life changes no matter what on a 90-day basis. But if you're someone approaching goals or pursuing your future self, inevitably over a 90-day period of time, some disorganization has happened, some weeds have crept in, maybe some bad habits, or just by nature of growth, things have gotten slightly out of hand. And so every 90 days, it's nice to recalibrate, maybe take a few hours to reorganize, clean out your closet, if you will, because maybe some extraneous clothes got put in there, or maybe just your systems have gotten disorganized as you've grown. And so every 90 days, revisit your future self, and it will slightly change over a 90-day period even. There's a great quote from Josh Waitzkin. Josh Waitzkin wrote the book, The Art of Learning, and every 90 days he asks himself this question: what did I believe 90 days ago that I don't believe anymore? So ideally, if you're on an approach mindset, meaning you're approaching your future self, you're learning, you're growing, you're experiencing what neuroscientists would call prediction errors. Prediction errors happen when you try something you've never done before and you incorrectly predicted it, because your brain forms memories to predict your behavior but it can only predict your behavior based on past experience. And so when you're trying new things, you're actually exposing yourself to new things. You're going to have a lot of prediction errors because you're going to see that your experiences aren't the full picture. And what's great about prediction errors, which is another word for learning, is if you are someone who's highly committed to your goals, or high hope, as psychologists would say, you'll take feedback from your experiences and you'll use that to improve your process. Also, when you experience prediction errors, you will change your memories. Your memories literally change to update themselves based on the new information it has. And so every 90 days, it's good to recalibrate, revisualize your future, reset your goals, and then to weed out the garden and to refocus in on your 80-20. What matters more than anything right now? Where have weeds crept in? Where have I gotten off course due to turbulence? And how can I then double down on what matters most? The more you invest in the few things which matter to you, what Greg McKeown would call the essential, the more you invest in what matters more than anything else, the further your future self will go, the bigger your future self will get. And as you keep investing early and often into your future self will keep getting bigger. And the reason for that is because you'll be building confidence. You'll be building confidence because you will have taken action, goal-oriented action. And that's really the key, is clarifying what you want, knowing what you want, and also knowing that it's already yours. And you build that knowing by actually committing. You commit to what you want, and then through that commitment, you take action towards your future self. And by taking action, you build confidence, and that confidence then creates an inner knowing that what you want is already yours. And then you keep clearing out the lesser goals, keep clearing out the stuff that doesn't matter. There are a few things in your life that matter. I love the quote that you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. Almost everything is not important. Almost everything is a distraction towards your future self. And so taking the time to say, who is my future self? What do I value more than anything? What do I want to invest in and grow? And what are the 80-20 that get me there? What are the few relationships to keep investing in? What are the few behaviors that create almost all of my results? And then how can I get rid of everything else? I would also invite you to look at your calendar over the next week, over the next month, and look and say, what actually on my calendar is in the 80% that is a waste of time, and literally remove it. Remove those lesser goals, pull out those weeds. Every time you do that, you're reflecting your future self. Your future self is more valuable than you because ideally they're more valuable than you. It's like compound interest. If you invest, your future self keeps getting bigger and bigger. You may have a few seeds in your hand right now, but to your future self, that may be an entire orchard. And so your future self has enormously more potential than you have to the extent you actually invest in your future self and don't cost them. And so you want to start being your future self now. You want to live and be from your future self, not towards your future self. A lot of people think you have to think to your goal, but really you want to start thinking from your goal. You begin with the end in mind, and then you live towards the end in mind and from the end in mind. You think from your goal, you make decisions from your goal, and you be from your goal, not to it. You're not trying to get up there. You actually just elevate yourself and you start doing what your future self would do now. And that starts with your calendar. Look at your calendar and genuinely assess, what of these things is actually a distraction from my future self? What of these things is pulling me away from my future self? What of these things is turbulence? What of these things is weeds and distraction? The 80% of things that are ultimately a distraction from my future self, and start eliminating them as your future self would. Your future self is already where you want to be, and they don't need to waste time. And here's what's interesting. You get to where you want to go by being that person now. You have to start being your future self now and doing what they would do, and that's how you actually become your future self. It's not like you just eventually disappear and reappear there. You have to start being that person now and start making the decisions they would make, removing the weeds. And so I would invite you to first off clarify your future self, clarify what you value and what you want to invest in, and then zero in on the 80-20. What are the few things that really matter, and start doubling down on your investments in those things and peeling out, weeding out the garden of your life with the things that don't matter. And every 90 days, reevaluate, re-clarify your future self, and reset your 80-20 targets. Because every 90 days, it will change a little bit. You'll have had some prediction errors. You'll have grown. You'll have changed. You'll have adjusted. The world will have adjusted. You'll know things in 90 days that you don't know now. And so you can re-clarify, reinvest at a higher level, and ultimately you can make enormous progress every 90 days. You can focus on what matters. You can control your environment. You can control your inputs. You can control who you become. And your future self really cares. Your future self cares what you do now. Your future self wants you to make powerful investments in them and in the things which matter most, because your future self can grow dramatically beyond what you think. Compound interest is, as Einstein would say, the eighth wonder of the world. It grows bigger than you think if you keep investing in it. And so your future self is bigger than you think in amazing ways, but also in negative ways if you're not investing the right way. If you fail to plan, then you've planned to fail. You've set yourself up for failure. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how you can effectively not only plan, but set up your weeks and organize your weeks so that you're getting way more done every day and every week. Let's start with the first concept or quote, that you should never start your day until it is finished on paper. That's a quote from Jim Rohn. Never start your day until it is finished on paper. So I'm going to start with the day, but then we'll go into the week, and then we'll probably revert back to the day. You should never have started a day without having planned it out effectively. The problem is that 98% of people or 99% of people, rather than going to bed with a plan and thinking about their future self and who they want to be, and then going to bed and letting their subconscious actually create their future self. We all know this. 99% of people look at their smartphones within 10 minutes of bed. 95 or more percent of people are staring at their phone while in bed. And also there's a lot of research that shows that people procrastinate sleep because they're scrolling. One of the best things you could possibly do is go to bed an hour earlier than you probably are right now so that you can get up an hour earlier. A great quote is that if you lose an hour in the morning, you'll spend the rest of your day trying to find it. I think that's Richard Waitley. So if you waste that first hour of your morning, you're going to spend the rest of your day trying to find it. And so rather than wasting your day, rather than wasting your evening and pushing off sleep and essentially setting up your future self for disaster the next morning, go to bed an hour earlier. Put your phone on airplane mode 30 to 60 minutes before you go to bed and pull out your journal. Never start the day until it's finished on paper. Actually take the time to reflect on the day, measure your gains, as Dan Sullivan and I would say, measure your progress. What the research actually shows is that taking the time to write down 3 things you're grateful for at the end of the day, it not only boosts your happiness, but it boosts your sleep. So you could do that. You could take the time to actually reflect on 3 things you're grateful for from that day, but you could also find 3 gains from that day or 3 wins. They might not have been the 3 forms of progress you were looking to make, but what were 3 things that happened that day that show that you made progress? It could be something you learned, or it could be an experience you had with a loved one. What are 3 things that you're happy happened and that reflect gains or progress or wins? And then just write down what are the 3 most important things you could do for the next day. And that actually now takes me forward to weekly planning, but also just a much higher core concept in general. You obviously, just like you would want to give yourself space right before going to bed where you could plan your next day, and I would say no more than 3 priorities. Never have more than 3 items on your to-do list each day. And on a daily basis, those items on your to-do list should actually be pretty small. They should be very easy to do. So BJ Fogg, the Stanford psychologist, he talks a lot about, tiny habits, essentially. Even James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, talks about the importance of scaling the behavior down. When you're planning, when you're visualizing, when you're making your dreams, you want to be as ambitious as possible. And it's actually true. Your view of your future is what's driving your present. And so you want a massive future self. But when it comes to daily progress, you really want to scale it down so that it's extremely small, extremely doable, because you can actually commit to something small. And so when it comes to your 3 core priorities for each day, which you come up with the night before in your journal with your phone on airplane mode, and then you go to bed probably an hour earlier than you're used to going to so you can actually wake up and get working on your future self. Make sure that those 3 items on your to-do list are important, not urgent. They're things towards your future self. They're not like activities or behaviors that are like going to a work meeting. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about 1 or 2 or 3 important activities that are not urgent, that could easily be forgotten or lost, but that if you invest that time and that energy, and if you make that improvement, or if you actually work on them, you're building towards your desired future self. It's an important investment towards your future self. Now, when it comes to the week, just like you would on the daily basis where you'd give yourself 5 to 15 minutes, probably on the weekend, it could be a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, you'd want to take 15 to 30 minutes to reflect on your week and actually reflect on your progress, reflect on your gratitude, reflect on what actually happened, and then you'd want to make plans about what you wanted to accomplish the next week. What could be the most important thing you could accomplish? And just like on the daily, you would have no more than 3 items on your weekly to-do list. What are the 3 most important things you can accomplish? Of course, you're going to do more things. Of course, you're going to go to the grocery store, or you're going to have other activities, but what are the 3 most important, not urgent things you could do towards your future self? Let me give a little bit more context. in order to actually live effective days and effective weeks, you have to have a clear sense of purpose and mission. Without a clear sense of purpose towards your future, you're going to waste your present. That's one of the things that Viktor Frankl, the psychologist and Holocaust survivor, found. He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. Without a sense of purpose towards your future, the present becomes meaningless and the present becomes wasted. Without a clear sense of purpose towards your future, you decay mentally, spiritually, and physically in the present. And in today's ultra distracting environment, if you don't have a clear sense of purpose and mission that you're committed to and working towards on a daily basis, then you're going to be wasting your present. You're going to let enormous amounts of inputs come in. The world is filled with distraction, and if you're not clear on your sense of purpose and mission, then you're going to waste your present because you're going to let all sorts of distractions derail you. And I would say that that's probably where a lot of people are in their life, because they're not clear and committed on a future that they're excited about and committed to, and that they believe is a sense of purpose. The present is pretty meaningless and distracted, and your input shapes your outlook, and your outlook shapes your performance. And because people are not clear on their future and they don't have a sense of purpose, they're not finding effective inputs. They're not deliberately practicing, as psychologists would say. They're not actually finding the information they need to achieve their goals. Instead, they're being swamped by information that's completely random. And that randomized information is shaping their belief system, and it's distracting them. People are decaying and wasting away in the present because they have no purpose for their future. This is what's really important as well. Whatever view you hold of your future is the thing driving your present. And as a rule, most people are being driven by very short-term, very narrow versions of their future. They don't have a long-term vision and purpose that they're working towards that's important, not urgent. Instead, most people's future is urgent. It's just getting through the end of the workday, or getting to the weekend, getting to the grocery store. Like, most people's goals are so immediate. They're putting out just immediate fires, as Robert Greene would say, that they're not lifting their gaze and being committed to a longer term future self. And so before you can even live effective weeks and days, you actually need to know your bigger picture purpose. This isn't your sense of purpose for your whole life. It's like, what's your purpose right now? This could be for the next year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. If you don't have a clear sense of purpose and mission, then your present is wasted and it's distracted and you're wasting it. And so the first thing you need to actually do is you need to ask yourself, what is my purpose right now? What's the most important thing I could be focusing on right now? Or what do I want for my future? Let's just call it 3 to 5 years from now. What's the most important thing that I could be creating or building? Or what does life want of me right now? Those are some really important questions. And I would invite you to not think more than like 5 years out. Although obviously you could track upwards and think like, where do you want to be in 10, 20 years? But when it comes to your sense of purpose right now, and who you want your future self to be right now, what is the most important thing that you could create or do right now that you feel like life is asking of you? You might have something inside of you that you've wanted to do for years. Maybe it's learn a musical instrument. Maybe it's travel the world. Could be honestly raising your kids or preparing for retirement, whatever it is. What is life asking of you right now? Getting really clear on that sense of purpose so that you can actually use your present effectively, so you can actually drive your present effectively and have meaning in your present, but also have purpose in your present. So who is your future self? Let's just call it 3 to 5 years from now. And what are your core 3 priorities? Jim Collins in the book Good to Great said, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. And so what I would invite you to consider is, what are the 3 key areas of your life where you want to focus your most energy and attention and really massively grow those 3 areas? For me, right now, my core 3 areas of focus, or my core 3 priorities, are my family/faith, and then my writing books, and also money. So basically my purpose or my vision for my next 3 to 5 years is to really invest big, especially in my older 3 kids, but also in my faith and in my family. Like, that's my number 1 priority. The second one for me is 10xing myself as an author. I've written multiple books, but I want to go 10x bigger as an author. My former self, me like five or so years ago, my purpose was to become a professional author, but now I am that. And so my purpose now is to 10x as an author. And again, your purpose is what you choose, but it's what gives you purpose in your life and also meaning in what you're doing. The third one for me is 10xing my wealth, or 10xing my money. And again, these are just my 3, but I invite you to ask yourself, what are your 3 core priorities? What are your 3 priorities in life? What are the 3 buckets of life that matter more to you right now, and that you really feel like a sense of purpose and mission towards, so that you can really start focusing and investing in those areas and growing those areas? What are the areas of life that you really want to go big in right now and that will give you a sense of purpose, a sense of mission? If you can get clear on your purpose and you can define it into 3 core priorities, then you can start using your present effectively. Then you can start having more meaning and purpose in your present. Then you can clear the clutter and you can start focusing and actually designing your environment, designing your inputs. Your input shapes your outlook, but you can't get the right inputs if you're not clear on what you want. You can't deliberately practice. You can't learn. It's, as an example, let's just say that your purpose is to get really good at real estate and to invest a lot in real estate and to create financial freedom. If that's a clear purpose, then you can start actually getting the right inputs. You can actually start investing in mentorships or coaching programs or reading books or watching YouTube videos that will teach you how to start making those deals. But if you don't have that clear sense of purpose, you're just going to be swamped with information and distraction. So step 1, clarify your future self. Who do you want to be? What is your sense of purpose and mission? Set 3 core priorities. What are the 3 areas of your life where you're going to go big and invest? And then from there, you can set specific quantifiable, measurable goals. As an example for me, as one example, I'm going to be publishing 2 new books in 2022. And I also want my books to pass 1 million sales. And so like those are specific goals that I can set and effectively work towards over 2022 that allow me to move my purpose forward. They give my present direction, they give my present context, they give my present meaning. They give me the grit and the strength to go through the challenge. There's a great quote that Viktor Frankl talked a lot about. He said, when you have a why to live for, you can bear almost any how. You can go through almost anything if you've got a clear enough why. You can also find impressive and powerful ways of accomplishing your goals if you're super committed. When you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen. Once you get committed, all sorts of events issue from that commitment that allow you to move forward. If you're not committed, then you're just going to keep finding excuses. But if you're committed, you will actually create better results. There's actually a great quote from the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. They say that commitment is a statement of what is. You can know what your commitment is by your results. So whatever results you're currently getting in life is a reflection of your current level of commitment. But if you commit 100% to specific goals that fit within your 3 core priorities, then you can start living effective weeks. Then that now takes us back to the week where it's like, okay, when you're at the end of your week, you look back on your progress and you evaluate your progress. You are obviously grateful. And I would give yourself 15 to 30 minutes at the end of every week. 15 to 30 minutes. It could be Friday, Saturday, or Sunday where you just take 15 minutes of thinking time. You reflect on your week, how you did, your progress. You express a lot of gratitude. Gratitude is super helpful. And then you think to yourself, with the context of your big 3 priorities and your bigger picture goals for like the year, what are your core goals for the year? From there, you can actually say, what's the most powerful or important thing I can accomplish this week that would move me towards that purpose, that would move me towards those goals? If you don't have clear, bigger picture goals, how can you have a great week? And so if you have let's just call it your core priorities clarified, whatever those are, and if you have specific measurable goals, let's just say for the next 12 months, then you can ask yourself, what during this week could I do that would make the biggest difference? Every week is going to be different from every other week. It's not like every week is autopilot. At the end of the week, you might need to make different progress than you made this week. You might need to do different things, or you could do different things that would make massive progress. No more than 3 core outcomes. What are the 3 most important things you could do this week that would be massive? The more committed you are, the more courageous you will be. So what are 3 things you could do that would be either deep work, where you're going to sit down and focus? For example, me creating this video. This is deep work. This is me sitting and focusing and creating. So one aspects of choosing 3 goals for a week is, 1, it could be deep work where you're sitting and actually like thinking about something or creating something or connecting with someone or doing something for, could be a couple hours. Or it could be some courageous power move. What's some power move you could make towards your future self this week? It could be reaching out to a mentor. It could be investing in some coaching program. It could be removing something. Removing something that's stopping you could be a power move. Ending a relationship or ending a commitment. What's some power move you could make? So you just ask yourself, what are the 3 most powerful things I could do this week that would totally move me towards my future self? If you're not taking the time to plan, then you're planning to fail. And if you're not giving yourself 15 to 30 minutes at the end of your week to evaluate your week and then to plan for your next week in the context of your future self, in the context of your 3 core priorities, and in the context of your yearly goals, then you're probably wasting away your present. You're probably, as Viktor Frankl would say, wasting away your decaying mentally and spiritually, and you're probably distracted. Your attention is caught up in lesser goals. Your attention is caught up by other people's agendas. But if you can get clear and committed on your purpose, if you're clear on your 3 priorities of life, and if you're investing big in those 3 areas, and if you've got a massive vision, and if you've got clear, specific goals that are stretching and powerful that you're committed to, then your weeks can be spent well. Especially if at the end of every week, you're evaluating your last week and then you're making a clear plan, and your plans are based on the 80-20 principle. 80% of results comes from 20% of what you do. It's not about being busy, it's about being effective. It's about creating results, not being busy. So what are 3 powerful results you could create in the next 7 days? And then once you've got your weekly goals, you can then set daily goals based on those weekly goals. As just one example, my weekly goal may be to write 2 chapters of my book and maybe to film 5 YouTube videos. My daily goal then from there could be, well, I'm going to write 500 words today and I'm going to make 1 YouTube video. Those are daily goals based on my weekly goals, based on my yearly goals, which are based on my core 3 priorities, which is based on my future self that I'm super excited about and investing in. And then at the end of every week, you just measure your progress, express gratitude, and then set better plans for every week. At the end of every day, you evaluate your progress, you express gratitude, and you set better plans for the next day. And you never measure any day against any other day. You never measure any week against any other week, because each day is its own day. Each day has its own value. Each week is its own week. Each week has its own value. Each week is a different battle. And so there's no comparing this week with last week. There's no ideal perfect week that you're trying to like perfectly frame as a robot. No, this week is gonna be different from last week. Next week's gonna be different from this week. Today's gonna be different from, and so that's why you gotta have daily plans, weekly plans. Every week you're gonna have a different focus. I mean, it's gonna be based on the same goals probably, but what you need to accomplish this week, or what you want to accomplish this week, or the power moves you're gonna make, or the deep work you're gonna do this week might be a little different from what you did last week or next week. Same as today. You got to make plans and vision and commitment each day. One other super important point as it relates to evening routine. Obviously, going to bed an hour earlier than you normally do would be helpful, because then you can get up an hour earlier and get straight to your vision and operate from your future self. But also, how the energy and the spirit and the commitment you have towards your week is going to influence not only the week itself, but each day. And so during your weekly planning session, you can do a few things that increase your commitment. One is obviously you can start with meditation and prayer. Get yourself into a peak state. Get yourself out of your routine environment. Get yourself into the right frame of mind. It's nice to actually be in a good environment when you're doing this. Don't have your cell phone on and don't get distracted. Actually be present with your journal. Start with a prayer if you're someone of spiritual, if you're someone who has a faith in God. If you're not, start with just a little bit of meditation so that you can frame yourself the right way. Maybe even read your goals, and then give yourself the space to get committed to what you're going to do. Get yourself the space to get clear on what are the 3 most important things I can accomplish this week, and then get yourself committed. And if you're a person of prayer, you can pray and ask for that commitment. And then on a daily basis, when you're giving yourself 5 minutes to actually reflect on your day, and then to make your big 3 for the next day, your 3 core outcomes. If you're a person of faith, you can pray and ask God to help you get committed. Pray and ask God to help you to focus on and create that, and to be focused and to be committed, and to have the faith to create those results. And so the level of commitment, the level of faith and commitment and energy you put towards your week is going to influence who you are and how you operate during that week. And it's the same at the end of the day. The energy, the flow, the commitment, the faith that you put towards what am I going to do and who am I going to be tomorrow is going to influence how you wake up, when you wake up, and who you'll be. And you can go to bed proactively. You can go to bed with a vision and a commitment. You can pray on that. You can go to bed. You can visualize yourself living it out. You can even visualize your big picture future self. And then that's going to influence your subconscious while you sleep. And then when you wake up, you'll wake up with the orientation of your future self, and you'll start operating on the important, not the urgent. Otherwise, you just go to bed scrolling, and then you wake up and you're just on the hamster wheel of being your current self rather than operating towards your future self. Totally up to you. But that's how you effectively plan out your week. And you can have insane weeks if you're proactive, not reactive. You can have insane weeks if you're committed, and if you have a big picture or vision of your future self, if you've got 3 clear priorities of life, and if you've got specific targets that are massive. and require a lot of commitment and courage and the development of new skills, capabilities, new relationships. But your future self can be a fundamentally different person than you are today. Even in a year from now, you can be in an insanely different place if you're willing to live effectively on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, towards very specific goals. And then you can clear the clutter out and remove all the distractions that life is trying to throw at you. Until you're clear on your purpose, everything is going to be a distraction to you. That's one thing that Kobe Bryant said. He said, once I got clear on what I wanted, then life became a school to me, because then I could actually find the information I needed, the coaches I needed, go get the experiences I needed. But if you're not clear on who you want to be and on what you want, then your present is going to be wasted, and you're just going to be a ping pong ball, distracted by everything going on around you. And so you need to have a sense of purpose if you want to have a positive present. And in fact, I love the quote from Dan Sullivan. He said, the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger. Your future is what drives your present. Most people are driven by nearly immediate futures, even the next dopamine hit. A lot of people's future is only as far as the next scroll. But if your future gets big and committed, then you can start investing, and you can start experiencing the compound effect, and you can start having better weeks, better days, and ultimately you transform enormously fast. And in this video, I'm going to share with you a few powerful strategies for upgrading your situation, upgrading your environment. The first is strategic ignorance. The truth is that you don't necessarily need to be aware of everything going on in the world. Most high achievers aren't aware of most things that are going on, because if you're too aware of everything going on, this doesn't mean you should be radically ignorant or radically uninformed. It means you're strategically ignorant. It means you know that for the most part, most things outside in the world are out of your control. And so you focus on the sphere that you can control. This is a big problem in today's world, because we're so hyper connected that we know what's going on all over the world, versus in the past, we knew what was going on in our local community. And so we get stressed out when something bad happens like 5 states away or across the world. And yes, it's important to be globally connected. But at the same time, if we're getting hyper stressed and freaking ourselves out and creating the fight or flight response because of something that happened 5,000 miles away, then we're going to constantly be in a stress state. And so this is why most high achievers don't consume mainstream news, mainstream media. They don't scroll through their newsfeed, because think about it. Most of that is created at a low level. It's created out of a level of fear, a level of pessimism, a level of scarcity and a level of victimhood. And so why would you, as someone who's trying to create a better life for yourself, consume content that's created by people at a level of scarcity and of emotional fear and hate? You wouldn't do that, because whatever you consume, you consume the energy of it as well. And so you block that out. You don't watch mainstream news. You don't watch mainstream media. You actually get your media from better sources. And so the first one is just strategic ignorance. And there's a lot of research on this. There's a great book actually called The Paradox of Choice, showing that the more options you think you have, ultimately the less you're able to make high quality decisions. And so ultimately you want to cut off most of the information that's available to you so that you can be fully aware of what you're trying to create for yourself, for your family, for your life. If you have too much stuff coming in, which is ultimately sending your brain in 1,000 different directions and ultimately creating a state of fear and uncertainty and confusion for you, then you can't be in a flow state. You're ultimately creating for yourself what's called decision fatigue. You're throwing too much stuff in your brain, you're heightening your stress, you're throwing your brain in 1,000 different directions, and you're ultimately consuming a lot of stuff that's freaking you out over stuff you can't control. Instead, you want to be strategically ignorant. You want to be unaware of most things, because most things are irrelevant to you and to your goals. You want to focus on and consume information and media that ultimately helps you. There's actually a lot of research on this subject when it comes to hope. People who are high hope, they consume media that relates to their goals. If they're trying to, for example, build their financial wealth, they consume media and information that helps them build their wealth. Whereas people with low hope, they actually specifically consume media that justifies their not having hope. There's a lot of media out there. I would say most of the mainstream media is actually targeted towards killing your hope, killing your belief that the future is going to be better. There's a lot of important research on the subject of the concept prospection. Prospection is the idea that whatever view you have of the future, that's what shapes your attitudes, your motivation, and your behavior in the present. And most media actually is intended to make you feel more uncertain and more fearful about the future. A lot of that media is to make you feel like the future is going to be worse than the present. And if you believe the future is worse than the present, then how do you think you're going to feel in the present? That's actually the opposite of what high achievers do. High achievers consume media that makes them realize their future is bigger than their past. As Dan Sullivan said, the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger. Well, people with high hope, they study information that helps them think better, that helps them focus better, that helps them actually tangibly know how to achieve their goals. One of the big differences, again, between high and low hope people is that high hope people, they're very clear on their goals. They want accountability, which is also another aspect of environment. You want an environment that holds you accountable to your goals. You want to be clear, explicit about your goals, and you want people who hold you accountable. You also want to be in relationships where there's a higher expectation. Again, that's called the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect says that we're either rising or falling to the demands of those around us or to the expectations of those around us. So people with high hope, they've got clear goals, they want high accountability, they're also constantly studying information that ultimately helps them to achieve their goals, and they avoid or they're strategically ignorant of information that ultimately tries to tear away their hope and their confidence in their future. One other key aspect of this, and it's super deep and interesting, is that low hope people, they don't want to learn new methods or ways of achieving their goals. Instead, they keep trying the same way over and over and over again and expecting a different result, which is obviously insanity. They're unwilling to learn different methods and means. Basically, what the pure definition of hope is from a psychology standpoint is it's both having the will and the way. You need a clear vision, you need the belief that you can achieve it, but you also need to find a better strategic pathway to getting there. You need a pathway to getting there, and that's why high hope people consume better and better media, is so that they can learn better strategies, mindsets, behaviors that ultimately allow them new and unique ways of achieving their goals. They're not just stuck doing something one way. Low hope people, on the other hand, they're unwilling to learn new things, to adjust their strategies. They're unwilling to learn new ways of doing things. If it's not in their comfort zone, then they're just going to consume media that tells them you shouldn't believe in the future anyways. So that's step one, is strategic ignorance. Blocking out information that ultimately destroys your hope and that's ultimately irrelevant to you so that you can focus on your life and your world and actually move yourself forward versus being caught in paralysis by analysis, being caught in decision fatigue and caught in fear mode about something you can't control. The next one is ultimately strategic remembering. So David Goggins wrote the book Can't Hurt Me. And one of the things that he talks about is the mirror of truth. He talks about staring at yourself in the mirror and being fully honest with yourself. If you're someone who's massively overweight, you've got to be honest with yourself. Rather than just lying to yourself and pretending like you're in shape, stare at yourself in the mirror. But one of the things that Goggins says is putting Post-its on the mirror about your goals, looking at your current self and then looking at the Post-its of your goals. This is a way of strategically designing your environment to remind you of your future self, to remind you of your goals, to remind you of what you want. You need constant reminders all around your environment of who you're trying to be. That's actually why I have this culture wall right behind me. This culture wall is filled with many of my favorite beliefs, many of my favorite values, and it's how I've engineered my environment so that I can ultimately have the life I want. By the way, these culture walls are created by Gaping Void. They're a culture design company. They've worked with many of the biggest companies in the world. It's brilliant. It's amazing. Ultimately, you want an environment that triggers and reminds you of your future self. Most people, they have an environment that triggers them and throws them back into their former traumas, into their former addictions. And so they're around people that keep triggering and reminding them of their former self, of their failures and things like that. And so they can't get out of that loop. The only way to get out of the loop is to cut off the trigger and to create a new one, to create a transformational trigger that reminds you of your future self. That's why Goggins' exercise is so powerful. He stares at himself in the mirror. He's fully honest with himself, but he's also looking at the Post-it notes on his mirror of his goals. Then he straight up gets to work. So the final one is called forcing functions. A forcing function is any situational factor that ultimately forces you to produce an outcome. So the historian Will Durant said that the ability of the average person could be doubled if the situation demanded it. If the situation demanded it. You're, again, either rising or falling to the demands of your situation. And if your situation isn't demanding you to rise up, then you probably won't. But if you can create a situation that forces you to rise up, then you will. So for example, Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that work expands or contracts based on how much time you have to give it. So this is why short deadlines really work. If you gave yourself a month to do something, it would take a month. If you gave yourself a week to do it, it would take a week. If you gave yourself 3 days, it would take 3 days. So that's a forcing function, is creating a very short timeline and forcing yourself to do it. Social accountability is another form of forcing function. If, for example, you have a workout partner who's waiting for you at the gym, you're probably going to go. But if you don't have that social accountability, you're very likely to let yourself down. We will let ourselves down more than we let other people down, which is why you want to involve other people in your goals. You want other people to help you achieve your goals. You want to have high accountability, as high hope people have. So you want to have coaching. You want to have mentorships. You want to have accountability partners. You want to have people who are involved in your goals with you so that your performance not only affects your outcomes, but it impacts other people's outcomes. This is another thing that Goggins said. When David Goggins actually started having kids, I think he might have had maybe a daughter, he realized that his performance not only affected him anymore, it actually impacted his family. And that gave him more incentive to get down to work. I can speak from experience on this principle. When I was doing my PhD, my wife and I became foster parents of 3 kids. A lot of people think that having 3 kids would be detrimental to my performance and to my productivity, but the opposite is true because of the Pygmalion effect. Once I had 3 kids, all of a sudden I had this new weight of responsibility forced upon me, and now I needed to rise up. I needed to get things done. Interestingly, I started blogging online the same month, or around the same month that we got our foster kids. And that had been something I'd procrastinated for literally years. I wanted to become a writer for years, but it wasn't until I had that new responsibility heaved upon me. The saying that with great power comes great responsibility is actually the opposite of truth. It's with great responsibility comes great power. You've got to take on responsibility. You've got to take on that ownership. You've got to put those forcing functions in your life. Short deadlines, social accountability, high investment. Think about it. There's a lot of research that shows that the more invested you are, the more committed you become. So if you invest in your goal, if you invest in your future self, you're going to be a lot more committed to that future self. I'm right now training for example, an ultra marathon, and I'm just hiring a coach. And when you hire someone, when you put money down, you start to really have ownership over that thing. You start to identify with it more and more. So whatever your goal is, you want to invest in that thing, and it becomes a forcing function. You want to have high consequences for failure. That's one of the things that they've found with the flow research. People who, for example, are extreme athletes, snowboarders who are hitting huge jumps and flying 100 feet, the consequences for failure could be death. So they lock into an extreme flow state, and then they ultimately can tap into their highest performance. That's what you want to do. You want to engineer situations and environments that put pressure on you. There's a great quote that says, pressure can bust pipes or it can make a diamond. You ultimately want to put yourself in a situation where there's pressure to succeed. It's good, healthy pressure. It's eustress. It's the kind of stress that makes you stronger. A lot of people are just too afraid to create an environment that ultimately forces them to succeed. They're too afraid to publicly commit to their goals. They're too afraid to socially say who their future self is. They're too afraid to admit what they want. They're too afraid to invest in their future self. They're too complacent to remove the negative inputs from their life, and to become strategically ignorant, and to design an environment that keeps them strategically aware of their future self, such as the Post-it notes. And they're unwilling to apply forcing functions to their life. A forcing function is creating and engineering a situation that forces your hand. It forces you forward, because you know that if you haven't created a situation that forces you forward, that your weaker self will come out and you'll try to get out of it. But if you engineer a situation where it's like, no, you got to show up, you got to do it. You've publicly committed to this thing. Now people know it's coming. Then you've outsourced your motivation to a situation, which is the most powerful thing you can do. So your willpower is weak compared to situations. You've got to design the situation ultimately to pull you to where you want to go. This is why they say that you can't overcome an addiction through willpower. Ultimately, you need other people. You need help. You need support. As Johann Hari said in his famous TED Talk, he said the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is human connection. You need other people. You need social support. You need vulnerability. You need what Peter Levine would call an empathetic witness. Someone who's empathetic towards you, someone who can hear you, someone who can help you reconstruct the meaning of your experiences. You can't overcome an addiction through willpower alone. You ultimately need to change your environment and change your system, and you need to get social support, social accountability, and help. Your input shapes your outlook. When you start surrounding yourself with new people, you're going to have new thoughts. You're going to start to adapt to your new environment. That's one of the things that is so powerful about human beings, is how adaptive we are. It doesn't matter how big the leap is from one situation to another, you will quickly adapt to the stresses, the pressures, and the demands of that new environment. I found that when going from 0 to 3 kids, immediately I was able to quickly adapt and adjust. Yes, it was stressful. Yes, it was a shock to my system for a little while, just like jumping in a swimming pool. But when you jump into a swimming pool, you quickly adapt to the new situation. And that's what happens when you change your environment. You quickly adapt, and then all of a sudden your thoughts, your goals, and your identity start to mimic and match your environment. In order to have an effective day, week, or month, you need to be connected to your bigger picture future self, and then you have to have some really clear filters for making decisions. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how to apply some of those filters so that you can have a very effective month. Watch this video to the end, because this video is going to show you exactly how you can determine each week or each month. I'm going to, in this video, use the month as an example. In fact, I'm going to talk about February of 2022, but I'm going to share with you a few principles that you can use as filters to making sure you're living your weeks and months as effectively as possible. So let me first share my screen with you. This is a quote from Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote the book Good to Great, and he said, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. One of the things Collins found, and he studied the difference between very successful companies and average companies, or even good companies, is that the companies that don't really make a lot of traction, they have way too many objectives. They're going in too many different directions. And so the companies that go massive are the companies with like 3 or less priorities. They're really focused. They know what their future self is. They're aligned on a very clear vision. And so this is a principle that I recommend you look at with your own self. Do you have 3 clear priorities? Are these 3 priorities in alignment with what you want for your future self? One of the things that Viktor Frankl talked about, and a lot of people have talked about this, but you need to have a clear sense of purpose and mission. Without purpose, people perish. Without purpose, your life becomes meaningless. And purpose is not vague. Purpose is like very specific sense of purpose right now. What is the most important thing you could be doing right now? You could clarify your purpose by defining 3 priorities. That's actually what I would recommend you do, is your purpose is embodied within your 3 priorities. These are my priorities right now. If you would have talked to me 5 years ago, these would not have been my priorities. 5 years ago, my priorities were to become a professional writer, finish my PhD, and grow my family. But I've now evolved beyond that. And so my priorities and my purpose is not the same. Just like my future self will not have the same priorities and purpose as I now have. But for the next 5 years, this is definitely my 3 biggest priorities. These are the 3 areas where I want to make the biggest impact on my future self. So what I invite you to do is I invite you to ask yourself, what are the 3 areas of your life that matter more than anything? Anything outside of these areas is what would be called a lesser goal. There's a quote from Robert Brault. He said, "You're kept from your goals, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal." It's only by clarifying and defining your purpose, your future self, and your priorities that you can actually live effectively, that you can actually utilize your time well on those areas which you find more important. There's actually a great quote on this topic by Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn said that most people major in minor things. So the reason they major in minor things is because they haven't clarified what absolutely matters most to them. And then they haven't created a massive vision for their core priorities and then spent their days actually focused on the important, not the urgent. These are the important for me, not the urgent. There's a lot of things that attempt to hit my time that are either distractions, lesser goals, other people's agendas that are outside of these priorities, or they're just lesser versions that are not going to take me there effectively. Those are all things to be removed. So now I'm going to take these principles and talk to you about how you could actually use them to plan an effective week. I'm going to actually just use myself as an example for my planning in February. So this is my February planning. Just like you have no more than 3 priorities in general, it's best to have no more than 3 goals on a monthly basis, 3 goals on a weekly basis, and 3 goals on a daily basis. A lot of people, they have literally 10, 15, 20 goals, and that's a violation of the 80-20 principle. The 80-20 principle says that 80% of results comes from 20% of what you do. So if you have 10 items on your daily to-do list, at least 8 of those, probably 7 or 8 of those are a complete waste of time. And you need to clarify which of these 2 or 3 are the biggest impact that will make the biggest impact on my future self. So I recommend no more than 3 goals on a yearly basis, 3 goals on a monthly basis, 3 goals on a weekly basis, and 3 goals on a daily basis. And so these are my big 3 for February. Finishing the first draft of my new book that I'm writing called 10X is Easier Than 2X. I've got to submit the first draft of that book, 25 new long form YouTube videos, and then solidify my next big book collaboration and also get the payment in place for that. So these are my big 3 for February. But just because I wrote these down does not mean that these are actually the right things that I could or should be doing to be super effective. So what you want to do is, after you've written down what you believe to be the 3 biggest and most important goals that you could accomplish in the next 30 days, I believe that these are 3 very tangible, very measurable, and very powerful outcomes that if I'm focused on, and if I actually achieve them during the month of February, it would be an incredible month. And so I don't have 10 items, I've got 3, but I still want to use a process to actually filter, are these the right ones? So what you want to do when you've written down and defined your 3 objectives, I guess you could say for the next month, you could also do this on a weekly basis. You could even do it on a daily if you wanted, but daily's a bit, I would measure daily against your monthly. But when it comes to monthly, I want to measure against my core 3 priorities. So I just set those 3 goals. I just set my 3 targets for February. But what I want to measure them against is not just my 3 priorities, but where my priorities will be in 5 years. So This is the compounded version of my 3 priorities. In 5 years from now, my oldest is going to be serving a church mission. My younger daughter, Jordy, will be close, but I want to have hundreds of peak experiences with my kids. I actually have we have 6 kids, but we have 3 older kids that we adopted from the foster system. Those kids are 14, 12, and 10. So this is my top priority, but also within that, my older 3 kids are like teenagers now, or almost teenagers. And so they're really my core focus, having tons of peak experiences with them and helping them progress in their life and helping them become the best people they can be. On the books category, and what I'm talking about right now is taking your big 3 priorities and scaling 5 years into the future and having a 10x vision of your 3 priorities in the next 5 years. So what's the compounded 10x version of these 3 priorities in 5 years from now? You want to know where the massive future vision is of where you want to go, and then you go back and you measure your monthly targets against those. So in 5 years from now, I plan to have 12 plus books published and over 10 million copies sold. This is the 10x version of where I'm at right now. Not 10x books published, but that's where I want to be in the books category. And these are my 3 priorities. But what you want to think about when you think about your 3 priorities is, what's the 10x version of these? Where's your future self in these 3 areas? Because you want to be specific. I love the question, what are you optimizing for? You can't really ask that question without planning where you want to go. And you can't really optimize generally. You have to optimize specifically. So no one's going to have the same vision of their future self. No one's going to have the same core 3 priorities. These are my 3 priorities. My goals are my own. My future self is my own. Your opinion of my big 3 really doesn't matter. And my opinion of your future self doesn't matter. We all have different goals, desires, interests. But this is the 10x version of my books. And then money is just 10xing my current net worth and having way more collaboration in my life and way more of what Dan Sullivan would call total cash confidence. So this is the compounded 10x version of my big 3, where I plan to be in the next 5 years. And one thing that's really important to realize, I've shared this story many times before, but I love the story of Mr. Beast. 5+ years ago, actually in 2015, Mr. Beast, who, if you don't know him, he's the biggest YouTuber in the world. He's 23 years old, makes over 100 million a year, has almost 100 million subscribers on YouTube. But if you were to look at Mr. Beast back in 2015, he was a 17-year-old high school kid living in his parents' house with no money. And he had like 8,000 subscribers, if you just looked at him, you wouldn't think he was going to become what he did. The only reason I share that as an example is because 5 years from now, 5 or 6 years is a really long time. If you're focused, if you're intentional, if you're clear on your future self, and if you're clear on your priorities, and if you're removing all distractions and lesser goals and actually focusing on what matters most to you, if you're actually spending your days going towards what you want. And so I actually share this compounded version of my future self to say, this is actually being conservative, because 5 years from now, the compound effect takes you much further than you expect or than you think. This would actually be really amazing if in 5 years, this is my current self in 5 years. This is my projected 10x future self in the 3 areas I project, or the 3 areas that are my core priorities. So anyways, once you've actually taken your 3 priorities and 10x them and made your vision of your 5-year future self in a massive way, then you actually re-examine your February planning. Now that I've actually reminded myself, oh yeah, what's actually possible? Now I re-look at the big 3 I just set. Have 10x book draft finished, 25 long form videos, and solidify my next big book collaboration. Are these 3, big 3, the most valuable, most useful, most powerful, most important things I could accomplish in February to hit my big 3? What you'll probably notice is that I don't have anything family related on this. I actually just recently created a really beautiful system with my older 2 kids, which allows us to have peak experiences almost every single day. So I feel like these 3 are really good, but here's some really good questions. Is this the 80-20 of my future self? Are these 3 the most powerful results I could produce and powerful focuses I could have for the next 30 days if I'm serious about my 10x future self? Is this the best possible use of my February? Is this how my future self would handle this month? So if my future self 5 years from now could come back and live my life for the next month, knowing what they know and being where they would be, is this how they would use their time? Obviously, my future self's a lot clearer and more powerful than I am. So that's a really good filtering question. Is this powerful and committed enough, or is this me playing safe? Is this me being distracted? I invite you to use this process as a tool and as a filtering process for not only getting clear on your future self, not only clarifying your 3 priorities and then 10xing your vision on the areas you want, but then using this as a filter for living better months, better weeks, and better days. If you study Olympians such as Michael Phelps and others, you find that they spend a lot of time visualizing their future self. They spend a lot of time at night specifically, but also before they practice and just throughout their day, visualizing themselves achieving their dreams, visualizing themselves on that podium winning gold, visualizing themselves doing the perfect performance. They spend a lot of time visualizing their future self, and there's a huge amount of research that shows that in order to actually engage in what psychologists call deliberate practice is how you develop skills and abilities and ultimately transform yourself into someone who's an expert at something. The only way to engage in that level of practice and training on a daily basis, where you become elite at what you do, is to have a clear version of your future self, a clear vision of your future self. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about the importance of visualizing, seeing, thinking about your future self.
Feeling connected to your future, feeling the inspiration, the joy, feeling the exuberance, the love for your future every day is going to, just like your body follows your mind to the coffee maker, to the toilet every morning, to the known, your body is going to follow your mind right into that future because that's where your attention and your energy is.
There's even a great book called As a Man Thinketh, and in that book, he talks about how your mind is like a garden and your thoughts are the seeds. Most people's mind, or their garden of their mind, is overrun with weeds. They're not in control of their garden, just like it's run wild. And so one of the first steps is obviously tilling the ground, completely clearing it, and then planting the right seeds so that those seeds bear fruit. And so what you think about and what you feel creates your future self. And my question for you is, how much time do you actually spend visualizing your future self? How much time do you spend seeing it, feeling it, creating it, being grateful for it? Neville Goddard said, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Do you know who your future self is? Do you actually see yourself being there? Do you spend time thinking about your future self in the negative, where you're expecting poor health in the future or poor financial situations? Are you creating negative outcomes by the thoughts you're planting? Or are you proactively planting the right seeds? Are you proactively planting and visualizing and seeing a beautiful vision of your future self? Visualizing your future self, especially at night before you go to bed, seeing that and then spending your days creating it and living into that, performing into your future self is crucial. If you're not spending time visualizing your future self and also writing down your goals, writing them down, writing down the achievements of them, if you're not spending your life chasing and creating your future self and living intentionally, then what are you doing? You're actually living your life by default. You're just going through the motions. You're not actually doing anything. You're not being creative. You're not taking action. You're not using your agency as a human being. So the first step is actually choosing who your future self is. It's okay to choose something, and even if you don't believe it's possible yet, it's okay to choose something even before you visualize it, but choose it. Even if you choose, being in a happy relationship or being an entrepreneur or getting to a certain level of income or whatever it is, connecting with God, whatever it is, choose something even before you believe it, and then write it down. Then spend time visualizing it and seeing it and spending more and more time seeing it. Even if you don't feel like it's honest, spend your time seeing it, spend your time writing about it, and then get to the point where you accept it. As you start taking action towards it, and as you just embrace that this is your future self, this is your identity, this is who you're going to be, you get to the point where you accept that this is just who you're becoming. This is who you are. And then as you take action towards your future self, you eventually integrate your future self. So you first start by choosing your future self, and you're the only person who can choose who you're going to be. But you have to choose who your future self is, or by default, your future self will just become someone. You don't want to set your future self up for disaster. So you might as well choose who your future self is. There's a great quote that says the best way to predict the future is to choose it, or to decide it and design it. And so choose your future self, or else someone else will. Only you can choose your future self. Then spend time seeing it, visualizing it, and then eventually you accept it. You just accept that this is your future self. This is who you're going to become. This is what's going to happen. You can stop doubting it. As you're taking action, your confidence will increase. Your expectancy will increase, and eventually you just get to the point where you accept your future self. You expect that this is who you are, this is who you're becoming, and then you integrate your future self. Every step forward you're taking power moves, you're taking actions towards your future self. You slowly and over time integrate the habits, the environment, the friends, the media. One of the great things is your input shapes your outlook. And so as you're weeding out, and that's really what you're doing with the garden of your mind, you're weeding out your former self. You're weeding out your former habits. You're weeding out the things you used to say yes to, and you now say no to those things. You've weeded out things, and you're now planting better seeds. You're planting with more intention, you're planting better seeds, you're planting higher quality seeds, and you're planting a more fruitful garden of your life, and you're creating better and better outcomes. But you're the one who has to decide what that garden looks like. And you've got to be the one to plant those, and you've got to nourish those thoughts. And you train your thoughts by writing down your goals, by training your inputs, by telling people about your future self. There's a lot of research actually by Robert Cialdini. He talks about a principle called the principle of consistency. And as human beings, we have a desire to be consistent with our words. And so not only do you choose your future self, but you proclaim your future self. Bo Easton would say you declare your future self. You say, this is who I am, this is who I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to accomplish. This is where I'm going to go, this is who I'm going to become, this is the life I'm going to create. By stating those things and by declaring them and by affirming them, you start to have a sense and a desire to be consistent with those. And as you take action towards those, often courageous actions, power moves towards your future self. You start to integrate. You start to build an environment around your future self. Marshall Goldsmith said, if you do not create and control your environment will create and control you. Integration means you're actually taking the actions you make. You're taking big leaps. And then you integrate it rather than reverting back. Reverting back would be having what Gay Hendricks would call an upper limit problem. He talks about that in the book, The Big Leap, where you make a step forward, but then because you're starting to feel good and you're starting to feel successful, you revert back to your comfort zone, which is feeling guilty or unworthy or whatever deep psychological issues hold us all back from success. And so you want to continuously integrate. As you learn something or as you improve, you set that as a new foundation for your current self, and then you keep improving. You have better friends around you, have better habits, you have a better environment, you've got better expectations, better measurements of success. You continuously integrate what you're learning along the way so that it just becomes a system and an aspect of yourself. And then you release your former self. You give yourself permission to just release your former self. Permission to not be who you used to be. Permission to forgive your former self. Permission to no longer be defined by your former self. In his book, Think Again, Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist, he talks about the importance of not attaching your current self to your former identity. A lot of times your former self made decisions or made commitments or took actions that no longer resonate with your current self. You can release your former self. You don't have to have any negative energy. In fact, you shouldn't have negative energy towards your former self. But as you're accepting your future self, as you're taking action towards your future self, as you're integrating your future self, you want to just release your former self. Let go of your former self. No longer be who you used to be. No longer say yes to what you used to say yes to. No longer believe what you used to believe. You actually are just continuously improving how you see the world, how you act, the clarity of your vision, the clarity of your action, the clarity of your word, the clarity of your integrity, the clarity of your morality. You're continuously improving your future self, and you're releasing your former self. And you're not the same person you were before, and you don't need to see the world the same way you did before, and you don't need to take the same actions you did before. You just release your former self every step of the way. So my invitation to you is visualize your future self, see your future self, feel your future self, be grateful to your future self. One of the things that Dr. Joe Dispenza said, and there's a lot of research on this, even in the realm of epigenetics, your brain doesn't know the difference between a visualization and an actual experience.
The act of closing your eyes, as an athlete, you know this, and you begin to rehearse in your mind, mentally rehearse what you're about to do, begins to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like you've already done it. Now the brain is no longer a record of the past, it's now a map to the future. And if you keep hitting that hardware over and over again, the hardware is going to become a software program. And who knows? You just may start acting like a happy person. There's no magic there.
And so if you visualize and if you feel grateful for an experience, your brain will begin to wire that as your reality. And then you'll start to actually manifest that reality. And so spend time visualizing, seeing, feeling, and being grateful for your future self, feeling those experiences, seeing them, rehearsing them, just like you would, just like a performer would rehearse an experience, just like an Olympian would rehearse an experience. And then you watch yourself perform and actually get better and better at actually creating the experiences in real life as you had in your visualizations. And then you can create that. You can create the outcomes you want. I can tell you this works. I recently wrote a book, and I spent some time visualizing what I want that book to look and feel like. And it's totally that. It's exactly what I wanted. And you are a creator. And the more time you spend visualizing and creating specifics, and then watching yourself create specifics, not generalities, creating specifics. What's a specific experience you want to have, or a specific result you want to create, or in a specific environment you want to create? The more you visualize specifics and then create those specifics, the more confidence you have. And then confidence creates the realm for more imagination. Albert Einstein actually said that imagination is more important than knowledge, but imagination is largely based on your level of confidence. And so as you even create small wins and celebrate those wins, then your imagination increases, and then with that increased imagination comes increased action and increased courage. And as you take more courageous actions, your confidence will continue to increase. So create with your imagination, create specifics with your mind, feel it, and spend time visualizing yourself. Spend time visualizing your future self. It's such a beautiful, important thing. Obviously, it's not enough. It's not enough to just think about it. You got to actually take bold action. One of the things I love about the book, The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone, is he says, not only do you want to have 10X vision, but you need to take 10X action. You need to take 10X the type of action and the quality and the consistency of action than you think you should. So it's not just about seeing. You do have to take 10X action. You actually have to engage in the behaviors of your future self. You got to actually apply courage. You got to take action. You got to be bold. You miss every shot you don't take. But those shots, you're not worried about making or missing every shot. You're just worried about taking action, and your actions begin to reflect your future self. Your environment begins to reflect your future self. Your situation begins to reflect your future self. Your income begins to reflect your future self. So who is your future self? That's my question. Who is your future self? Do you see that person? Are you clear on it? What are the specifics of that future self that you're now going to go create? I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up. Cheers to your future self. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Have an amazing day.